Imagine, for just a moment, that you are facing off against an enormous red dragon. In Dungeons and Dragons, you will roll initiative, calculate your attack bonus, check the dragon's armor class, spend your action, possibly using a bonus action, and then politely wait 17 minutes for Steve the Wizard to choose a spell. In Daggerheart, you will leap onto the dragon's back, roll two 12-sided die, succeed with fear, and discover that, yes, you have reached the dragon's head, but your trousers are now on fire. Both games let you become heroic fantasy adventurers. Both have classes, magic, monsters, and deeply concerning quantities of dice. But they create very different experiences at the table. So today, we're comparing Dungeons and Dragons with 2024 with Daggerheart, the core module, not Hope and Fear, to answer 3 questions. How are they different? How do they play? And which one is right for your group? Let's get into it. At the broadest level, Dungeons and Dragons is a relatively structured, rules-driven fantasy role-playing game. The Dungeon Master describes the situation, the players declare their actions, and the rules determine how those actions are resolved. D&D officially divides play into 3 major pillars: social interaction, exploration, and combat. Daggerheart is also a heroic fantasy role-playing game, but it places more mechanical emphasis on collaborative storytelling, emotional character moments, and consequences that keep the story moving. Its own rules describe the game as a conversation in which everyone builds upon each other's ideas. Players are encouraged to spotlight their friends, build the world, and play to find out what happens. This, of course, does not mean that there's no roleplay in D&D, and it doesn't mean that Daggerheart has no tactics. You can run an emotional, character-driven D&D campaign, and you can absolutely run a dangerous, tactical Daggerheart battle. The difference is what each system naturally encourages. D&D generally asks, what actions are you taking, and what rule resolves it? Daggerheart more often asks, what are you trying to accomplish, and how does the story change? This is the biggest and most immediate difference between Dungeons and Dragons and Daggerheart. I mean, D&D is built around the D20 test. You roll a 20-sided die, add the relevant modifier, and compare the total against a target number. This could be against armor class, saving throw DCs, anything like that. D&D also has advantage and disadvantage. With advantage, you roll 2 d20s and you take the higher result, and with disadvantage, you take the lower. It is clean, familiar, binary. You normally succeed or you fail. Yes, the Dungeon Master can introduce complications, partial information and improvised consequences, but the dice themselves don't automatically demand that. Daggerheart replaces the d20 with 2 differently coloured d12s called the duality dice. One represents hope, one represents fear. You roll both, add them together, include your modifiers, and compare the total against the difficulty. But you also check which one of the 2 die you just rolled was higher. So instead of only succeeding or failing, there are 4 common possibilities. Success with hope. You succeed and gain hope. Success with fear. You succeed, but there is a complication, and the GM gains a fear. Failure with hope. You fail, but you gain hope, and you face a small consequence. Failure with fear. You failed, and something even worse is going to happen. If both duality dice show the same number, you score a critical success. In D&D, that d20, if you roll a d20, you get a critical success. There are no critical fails in Daggerheart. That's just really bad with failure with fear. This means Daggerheart roll doesn't merely answer, did you do it? It also answers, who gains momentum? What does it cost? Is it going to be the players? Is it going to be the GM? Let's say you're trying to swing across a collapsing bridge. In D&D, you might be asked to roll athletics with a DC of 15. 17, success, you cross the bridge. In Daggerheart, we'll take the same DC, 15, and you may succeed, but with fear. You manage to cross the bridge, but the rope snaps behind you, separating you from the party. Let's do the same thing again, but you fail with hope. You roll a 13 with fear, or with hope. You don't reach the other side, but you catch hold of a root beneath the bridge. You're in danger, but your turn hasn't amounted to absolutely nothing. Daggerheart explicitly follows a failing forward philosophy. Every roll should change the scene in some way. Hope and fear aren't just descriptions, they're resources. Players spend hope to activate abilities, assist allies, and use character experiences. The GM collects fear and can spend it to interrupt the players, make additional moves, activate powerful adversary abilities, or trigger dangerous environmental features. Fear can even carry over between sessions, creating a visible dramatic economy. The players can look across the table and see the GM building a small pile of fear. Oh, excellent. The Game Master has 7 tokens of narrative violence. See, in D&D, the Dungeon Master's power is mostly limited by the scenario, creature statistics, and their own judgment. A dragon gets its turn because initiative says it does, or maybe a legendary action. In Daggerheart, the GM might spend fear to seize the spotlight or unleash one of the dragon's more powerful features. So fear gives the GM mechanical permission to escalate the scene while also warning the players that something unpleasant is being prepared. It's basically dramatic tension that you can stack into a little tower. Combat is where the systems feel dramatically different as well. D&D combat, D&D uses structured initiative. At the beginning of a fight, everyone rolls initiative and acts in order. On your turn, you have, as we've covered before, movement, an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. Positioning is generally measured in feet, and the rules support battle maps divided into 5-foot squares. That creates a strong tactical framework. You know when your turn is coming, you know approximately how far you can move, you know how many actions you can perform. The advantage to this is clarity, but the disadvantage is that combat can sometimes feel that everyone is waiting for their individual appointment with the monster. With Daggerheart combat, there is no standard initiative roll. It does not use a rigid round structure, and characters don't have fixed allocation of actions before the spotlight moves on. Instead, the spotlight moves organically according to the fiction, who hasn't acted recently, or what the mechanics trigger. A player describes their action. If they roll with hope, the players maintain momentum. If they fail or roll with fear, the GM can seize the spotlight and make a move. This can be a disadvantage because if you are just rolling very poorly, it means that it's going to be back-to-back GM and it's not going to look good for your heroes and you're not going to be able to do much. But that is unlikely to happen. And there are abilities inside of Daggerheart which can cause rerolls, or you can get advantage and disadvantage adding a d6 to your roll instead of rolling 2 d20s. Back to this, if you fail or roll with fear, the GM can seize the spotlight and make a move, and after the GM finishes, the spotlight returns to the players. Hopefully. This can make battles feel fast, cinematic, and unpredictable. The warrior charges the troll. The sorcerer immediately follows by launching the warrior into the air with a spell. The ranger the ranger doesn't get his words right, but he fires an arrow at least at the chandelier up above. Then somebody rolls with fear, and the troll finally gets to explain why dropping a chandelier onto the creature standing beside you was perhaps not the tactical masterpiece you imagined, and then throw the warrior immediately into the sorcerer. The risk is that confident players may dominate the spotlight, while quieter players may hang back, but it is the GM's job to make sure that everyone gets a turn. Daggerheart's rules tell the group to keep moving attention around the table, and they offer an optional token tracker for groups that want more structured action economy. So, in short, or to conclude all of that, D&D combat is closer to a tactical board game, similar to like Warhammer 40k, whereas Daggerheart combat is closer to directing an action scene. D&D, in terms of health and other things on your character sheet, uses a large pool of hit points. If you have 67 hit points and you take 14 damage, you now have 53. Armour generally makes you harder to hit by increasing your armour class, and until you reach 0 hit points, losing health normally has no inherent effect on what your character can do. Daggerheart handles damage differently. Characters usually have a relatively small number of hit point slots, and you have 2 damage thresholds, major and severe. With optional rules, these can be increased. The amount of damage determines how many hit points that you mark. A smaller hit might mark 1 hit point. A major can mark 2, a severe can mark 3, and there's even optional rules to increase this further and further and further. Armour doesn't simply make an attack miss. You can mark an armour slot and use it to reduce the severity of incoming damage, but then you damage your armour. Daggerheart characters also have stress, representing physical, mental, and emotional strain. Stress may be marked to power abilities or as the consequence of danger. When your final stress slot is filled, you become very vulnerable. If you need to mark stress and you have none remaining, you mark a hit point instead. The result is that D&D health feels granular and Daggerheart damage feels categorical. D&D says you lost 23 hit points. Daggerheart says the attack was severe, would you like to reduce the damage, damaging your armour but reducing the damage that you take to your body. One feels like accounting, the other feels like your insurance provider is asking whether the dragon incident was preventable. Both games use classes, subclasses, and fantasy ancestries, but they arrange those components differently. D&D characters, according to the Player's Handbook, contains 12 classes and 48 subclasses. Building your character from the class, subclass, background, species, ability scores, skills, equipment, feats, and so on and so forth. Background and species both contribute to your character's origin and mechanical abilities, and D&D characters can become extremely mechanically detailed. 2 fighters might share the same class, but differ through subclass, weapon masteries, feats, fighting styles, species, traits, and equipment. That depth is one of D&D's greatest strengths. It's also why creating a spellcaster can sometimes feel like completing a tax return written by an elf. Daggerheart characters use 9 core classes: Bard, Druid, Guardian, Ranger, Rogue, Seraph, Sorcerer, Warrior, and Wizard. Each of these have 2 subclasses, totaling in 18 subclasses. Instead of species and background working exactly as they do in D&D, Daggerheart separates heritage into ancestry, representing your lineage and physical traits, and community, representing the culture or environment where you were raised. Characters also create 2 experiences. These are free-form phrases representing skills, histories, or defining qualities. You might choose former royal bodyguard of the Queen, never leaves anyone behind, or suspiciously knowledgeable about goblin toes. By spending hope, you can add a relevant experience bonus to an action roll. Daggerheart also uses domain cards. Each class has access to 2 thematic domains, and players select cards that grant spells, attacks, passive features, or special abilities. For example, the warrior has access to blade and bone. Those features are all about mastery of the body, that's the bone one, and mastery of the blade and weapons, that's the blade one, while the wizard uses codex and splendor. Codex is about the grimoires with all of their spells attached, and Splendor is actually about healing and the innovation, really. You're able to heal as a wizard in Daggerheart, that's pretty new. D&D gives you menus of class features, feats and spells, and Daggerheart feels more like building a personalised hand of abilities. D&D characters progress from levels 1 to level 20. As they level up, they receive predetermined class features alongside choices, such as subclasses, feats, spells, and maybe even multiclassing. The progression is extensive. and high-level D&D characters become exceptionally powerful. Daggerheart progresses from levels 1 to level 10. When leveling up, players have more control over certain improvements. They may increase traits, add hit points or stress slots, strengthen experiences, increase your evasion, or gain more domain cards, or just improve their proficiency. Multiclassing becomes available from level 5 and grants access to another class feature, subclass foundation, and one of that class's domains, so you can make some very complex characters. D&D offers a longer and generally more granular advancement curve, and Daggerheart offers fewer levels but tries to make each level provide meaningful customization. For a DM, D&D offers an enormous already existing ecosystem. There are decades of adventures, monsters, campaign settings, third-party supplements, digital tools, and accumulated community knowledge. Detailed rules for areas such as spell effects, conditions, equipments, movements, combat interactions that support and can make preparation easier because there's already a stat block for the creature you need. Somebody, somewhere, has calculated the armor class of an animated wardrobe. The downside is that D&D can place substantial pressure on your dungeon master. You may need to understand and counterbalance the monster's abilities, the player's spells, the tactical maps, and the edge case rules while also performing every NPC. Daggerheart gives the GM a different toolkit. Adversaries have motives, tactics, and special features, and the environments themselves can also function mechanically with their own difficulty, impulses, and fear-powered actions. Rather than always waiting for an enemy's initiative count, the GM makes moves when the fiction demands it, when a player rolls with fear, or when the GM spends fear. The rules distinguish between softer consequences and harder moves, encouraging the GM to match the severity of the response to the result of the roll. This gives the GM flexibility, but it demands improvisational confidence. D&D frequently tells the DM, here is the rule. Daggerheart frequently tells the GM, here is your dramatic permission, decide what makes sense. For completely new players, Daggerheart's character sheets and duality dice can initially look unusual. There's hope, fear, and stress, and the things we've covered before, these are unfamiliar concepts to you. However, once you understand the core loop, Daggerheart can feel intuitive, because most actions use the same 2d12 framework. D&D has a simpler central role, the d20, and very familiar surrounding terminology. The actions, the bonus actions, reactions, we've covered this. I would simply put it this way. D&D has the simpler individual dice roll. Daggerheart has the more unified narrative resolution system. For a group already familiar with tactical games, D&D may be easier. But for a group coming from improvisation, collaborative storytelling, or actual play programs, Daggerheart may click more quickly. In short, you'll want to choose Dungeons & Dragons when your group wants structured tactical combat with extensive character options and very detailed rules, with long-term progression and an enormous library of existing material. But you'll want to choose Daggerheart when your group wants cinematic action, flexible terms and collaborative world building, character relationships and dice results that continually generate complications. D&D is excellent at delivering the fantasy of building and mastering a character within a robust game system. Daggerheart is excellent at turning every role into a story prompt. Neither game is universally better. They're just trying to create different rhythms. D&D says, roll to see whether you succeed. Daggerheart says, roll to discover what success is going to cost you. Let me know in the comments which system you prefer, and whether your group has tried Daggerheart after playing D&D, or maybe you tried Daggerheart and you're moving to D&D. You can subscribe for more tabletop RPG advice, reviews, and resources. And if you like the way I present information and you think I would make a good GM for either D&D or Daggerheart, you can find me on Start Playing and a link in the description and on my page. Until next time, may your rolls be high and may your GM's fear pile remain extremely small. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye for now.